Hello, class, and welcome to week 3 in Interviewing Techniques. Motivational Interviewing Foundations will be our core focus today. So, my name is Dr. Neil Soggie, and I am your instructor for this course. So, today we will be diving into the core foundation of many modern counseling approaches, something known as motivational interviewing, which kind of forms the core of this course in interviewing techniques. Motivational interviewing is more than a technique, however. You can really kind of think of it as a way of being with people. And it's more specific than that, even. It's a way of being with people who are ambivalent about change. Now, if you have any experience in addiction and recovery work, then you know that you will meet clients who are torn between wanting to change and wanting to stay the same. What motivational interviewing offers you is the tools and a stance, a way of being, to walk with them. You're not pushing them. You are asking questions. You are creating a safe space. You are living a way of being that helps them to recognize that they want to change and help them to choose the direction of that change while respecting the client. So, as always, I have a few things that I would like to focus on in today's class. First off, I will share a little story about a key individual. This individual is central to motivational interviewing and helps to move the field of interviewing techniques within counseling forward. We'll then move on to look at the whole spirit of motivational interviewing, because there's some key themes within motivational interviewing that I think it's important for us to be mindful of. The first one is the whole idea of collaboration. We are working with the client, and the client is working with us. We're also thinking in terms of evocation. We are trying to bring something up within the client. And of course, autonomy. We always want to respect the power and autonomy of the client, but recognize that the client does somewhere deep down want the best for themselves, even though they may be struggling between that and what simply feels good. So those are the key core motivational interviewing principles, the ideas of collaboration, evocation, and autonomy. Then we'll move into the principles of partnership, of working with this person, of acceptance, of compassion, and evocation. And then we'll dive into more deeply into the role of ambivalence, that internal struggle that goes on with the client, and explore how we can listen for that sense of ambivalence within the client and how we can work with those mixed feelings that the client has. Now, I want to introduce you to someone by the name of William R. Miller, born in 1947, who is a clinical psychologist and researcher who is a co-developer, and we'll introduce you to the other person that helped develop motivational interviewing later on in the course, but helped to develop motivational interviewing in the early 1980s. Now, while working with clients struggling with alcohol use, Dr. Miller noticed that empathetic, client-centered conversations often sparked greater motivation than did things like confrontation, or simple instruction. And his early research, alongside Stephen Rolnick, who is the other co-developer that we'll explore later on in the course, they established motivational interviewing really as a brief, directive, yet collaborative approach that helps clients explore and resolve ambivalence. Miller's work has influenced not only addictions treatment, but has expanded off into healthcare and education and criminal justice settings. And he continues to publish and train counselors around the world, emphasizing that the spirit of motivational interviewing is more important than the technique. So remember, the spirit of collaboration, of safety, of autonomy is more important than any one technique, even though the title of this course is Interviewing Techniques. So, what is motivational interviewing? We can think of it as obviously something that's collaborative or working with the client. It has goal-oriented style to it, about communicating with particular attention to the language of change. So we're always looking for language about change and catching that. We're not creating it ourselves, we're drawing it out of the client. And it's designed really to strengthen the personal motivation of the client and to strengthen the commitment of the client to specific goals by eliciting and exploring the person's own reasons for change. That's the key. We need to find what their why. Why do they want this? What are they trying to get out of this? Motivational interviewing is not about convincing clients to change. It's about drawing out their own motivations. And it's about also respecting their autonomy along the way. This isn't about controlling other people. This is about walking alongside other people and helping them to clarify things for themselves, with our goal being to draw out what is already there within them and help them to look at it and deal with it. So the spirit of motivational interviewing really includes 4 key principles. First off, there's the whole idea of partnership. You work with the client. You enter into the client's world. You don't work on the client. You're not a carpenter working on a house. You're working with a client on their own choices, desires, and goals. It's also about acceptance. A client is not going to invite you into their lived world unless you can provide them with acceptance. So you respect the client's autonomy and their worth. It's also about compassion. You keep the client's best interests in your heart. And it's about evocation. You are drawing out of the client's reasons for change rather than imposing your own reasons for change. You are drawing out of the client the reasons for change. So if motivation feels like manipulation, the simple rule is it's not motivational interviewing, because this spirit of partnership, acceptance, compassion, and evocation is not manipulation. And so that spirit of motivational interviewing is essential for it to be real motivational interviewing. And that's something that I think it's really important for us to keep in mind. Now, we talk about ambivalence. Ambivalence being that internal struggle of not knowing what to do, where to go, what kinds of choices to make. Addiction is addictive for a reason, because people like it. They want it. Sometimes it's the only thing that they think they want. But of course, there's other things that they want that addiction forces them to give up. And so that causes that little bit of ambivalence within them. And it's your job to, first off, normalize that ambivalence, and then help the person to understand that ambivalence, to not resist that ambivalence, and then finally to use that ambivalence. So clients often feel two ways at once about change. Now, we need to kind of remember here that ambivalence is not resistance. Ambivalence is simply the client being a human being. We all feel that way about things all the time. I love my truck. Sometimes I want a new truck. It doesn't mean I still don't love my truck. That kind of thing is a simple example of this. Your role is to listen deeply to both sides of the internal struggle, to reflect it, and to help the client to resolve in their own words where they're going to go in response to this internal struggle. When this is done well, this builds readiness and it builds motivation. So it needs to go slow. There needs to be patience. But when it's done well, it transforms lives. Now, if we were to talk about the principles of practice, if we were to kind of walk this into the real world, what does it look like? Well, motivational interviewing has 5 key principles to guide your interactions with people. First off, you want to not only feel empathy, which is, feeling what they feel, but you're wanting to walk into their world. And you do this by actually expressing empathy. This means that you are showing that you are listening. And you do this through what we call reflective listening. You're nodding your head. You're engaged with the situation. You are asking questions. The next thing is developing discrepancy. And that is helping the client to recognize that they do have ambivalence within their life, because sometimes the client will pretend that they don't, and they're able to deceive themselves into that, but that's not really human. Everybody has ambivalence. There's a discrepancy that's there, and it's your job to help them to find it. So the discrepancy is, what is the difference between your current behavior and your future goals? Do you want to have a good life? Well, then what does that good life look like? Does that look like a life with health and peace and relationships? And if so, what in your current behavior is helping that versus what in your current behavior is not helping that? That's the discrepancy that you look for. Now, in the midst of all of that is you are avoiding argumentation. There isn't confrontation in this. There isn't coercion in this. You are asking questions while accepting the client. If it becomes argumentation, you don't need to win, because the client is already in a situation where they need your help. So it's about simply being present with them. Avoid argumentation. Then it's about rolling with resistance. If you see resistance as it's a signal. It's a sign that, hey, you're coming up against something that the client is struggling with. That's a signal. It's not a wall. It might take some time for you to find the door, but you will get through this. So it's recognizing that there are some things that it just simply takes time to get through. But if you're empathetic and non-judgmental, the client will eventually let that resistance fall. And finally, support self-efficacy. The whole idea of motivational interviewing is the client doing it. So reinforce the client's belief in their own ability to change. You do not have the power to change somebody else. They have the power to change themselves. And so it's our role to support them in finding that self-efficacy and finding their ability to change. So what are some misconceptions about motivational interviewing? It's important for us, I think, to clarify what motivational interviewing is not. It is not a trick to get compliance. It's not some way of manipulating people to get them to do things that they don't really want to do. It is about helping them to recognize that there are two things that they might really want. They might really want their drugs, but they might also really want a good life. And your role there is not to trick them into choosing the good life. It's about helping them to figure out why they would choose that over the other. It's also not passive listening without direction. You don't just simply listen. You listen actively, and you are constantly probing and diving in, helping the client to clarify things. You are it's your question asking mirror. And it's also interviewing is not advice giving in disguise. Okay? We're not pretending to give them advice. We are actually there to draw things out from them. Remember, your lived world is not their lived world. You need to, and they only live in their lived world. It might make sense to you, but that's because you live in your lived world. They don't live in your lived world. They live in their lived world. So you need to use the resources of their lived world to help them to make the decisions that they're going to make and the directions. Remember, motivational interviewing is a skillful dance between empathy and direction. So you are guiding, but you're not dragging them along. Now, let's explore some basic skills that have to do with, that are really kind of central to motivational interviewing. There's something called OARS, the OARS method. And this has to do with how you are going to listen to the client. The first thing that you're going to do is the O. It's open questions. An open question is a question that requires them to give more than a yes or no answer. They have to tell a story, basically, about what is going on. That is an open question. An open question is one that kind of requires the person to give a story. Then there's affirmations. And affirmations are ways of helping the client to recognize their own strengths. You're really doing well here. Very courageous of you for coming in. Thank you for sharing that today. And then reflections. Reflections are, I hear you saying this. I hear you saying that you are struggling with the desire to be in this relationship or to continue with these other behaviors. But you're recognizing that you can't do both. That's a kind of a reflection. And then summarizing. Summaries are kind of going through and reflecting back a large, more broad worldview of what their world looks like. So it's you standing in their world, looking around and kind of recognizing all of this is theirs. and it's the world that they live in. And it's about acknowledging that they do have a lived world, and there's a lot in that lived world that is worth living for. That summarization really can be helpful. And these are tools where you can create a conversation that invites insight. You're inviting. You're not causing defensiveness. You're inviting insight, not defensiveness. And we'll go deeper into this, of course, in future lectures, but this is just kind of an introduction. Now, what does this look like? What does motivational interviewing look like? A simple example might be something like this. The client says, I know my drinking is hurting me, but I also feel like I can't get through a day without it. Now, what would you do as a motivational interview in this context? Well, you might say something like this. Well, I hear you recognizing the damage it's causing. And at the same time, it's something that helps you cope. Notice there that you are identifying an ambivalence. You're helping them to see the two parts of what it is that they're saying. And this is something we call a double-sided reflection. What it does is it honors the client's reality, but at the same time, it opens the door for further exploration. The key here, there isn't any judgment here. There isn't any shaming. It's recognizing what's going on in the client's lived world. And that really is a key part of motivational interviewing. Now, as we draw to the close of this lecture for this week, I want to highlight a few key terms that we've kind of explored a little bit. The first one is the idea of ambivalence. What is ambivalence? Well, it's the core of motivational interviewing, where we basically feel two ways about a behavior or a decision that we're trying to make. When we talk about evocation, what are we trying to do? We are trying to draw out the client's own reasons for change. So we're entering their world, we're exploring the world with them, and trying to get the client to pick up a particular reason that is already existing in their lived world. And what's the spirit of motivational interviewing? Well, it's an idea and attitudes of collaboration, of acceptance, and of empathy. So if we were to identify an element from this list here of the most central items to the spirit of motivational interviewing, we could say, obviously, in this case, none of the others really fit, except for evocation, where we're trying to, evocation, remember, is trying to draw out the client's own reasons for change. So, as we close out this lecture, remember that motivational interviewing is more than anything a way of being. Motivational interviewing is not a technique, it is a way of being. It requires you to have presence, a therapeutic presence that is calming and safe. It requires you to be showing respect as well as restraint. Now, in coming weeks, we'll build your skills step by step, but for now, just focus on that posture that you bring to the room. Learn as you talk with people this week. Learn to simply listen without trying to fix. Reflect without judgment. Invite without pressure. And by doing that, you are learning how to be a catalyst, not a controller. You need to let the client lead. And when you do, you'll be surprised at how much wisdom they carry inside of their lived world. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. My name is Dr. Neil Soggie, and I will see you next week. You take care. Bye-bye.